welcome to the most excellent 80s movies podcast. It's the podcast where a filmmaker and a comedian dig up and then bury and then dig up and rebury the 80s movies we think we love or might have missed with these our grown-up eyes to see how they held up. This is Pet Cemetery. And did I say it like it's spelled wrong? Pet Cemetery, a movie selection from 1989.
What is this place?
I brought you here to bury Alan's cat.
Daddy, is church all right?
Why, Judd?
I had my reasons.
I dreamed he got hit by a car and you and Mr. Crandall buried him in the pet cemetery.
What did we do tonight, Judd?
What we did, Lois, was a secret.
May the Lord bless you and keep you.
Has anyone ever buried a person up there?
May the Lord make his face to shine upon you.
You're thinking thoughts best not thought of.
Daddy's gonna do something really bad.
You're thinking of putting him up there. Don't deny the thought hadn't crossed your mind.
Come back to me, Gage. Come back to us.
Paramount Pictures presents Stephen King's all-time best-selling tale of horror. Pet Cemetery.
I don't know if you could tell from the audio, but I think it was an interesting choice to like completely blow the Stephen King cameo in.
I can't believe I'm just noticing that Pet Cemetery is spelled with an S instead of a C, like it is in the movie. Like I just naturally, my brain kept changing it. So
Yeah.
I think 50%. There's a 50% chance that people are thinking that we misspelled the name on the podcast listing, and I think the other 50% chance is that we accidentally spell it correctly with a C on the podcast listing.
Yeah. So which people do we want to think we're stupid? Regular normies who haven't seen the movie or people who love the movie? It's a coin toss. So before we jump in, are you a big Stephen King guy?
Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, so
Well, first I should say who you are.
yes. Wait, who are you?
Who am I? I'm Krissy Lenz, the director of the Neighborhood Comedy Theater, and the comedian for this podcast.
And I am Nathan Blackwell, independent filmmaker. So yeah, I still don't have my intro down yet. It's gonna evolve.
Yeah,
We'll figure it out.
Year 7 or 8 is when we get there.
It's early days, yeah. So what were we talking about? Oh,
Are you a Stephen King guy?
Correct. So technically no. So the answer is no, but just because I'm a terrible reader, I think I have ADD. It takes me 3 times as long to read like a book than it does most normal people.
Mm-hmm.
But Stephen King has always been like on the periphery of my curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I was going to if I was a better reader, because to be honest, I ingest movies much more voraciously, and Stephen King is definitely one of those kind of like islands in the mist that I see off of there that I'm intrigued by. I think I have started to read a couple of his books. And then also I've had like one of my friends who's an avid reader and also a writer. He was really into Stephen King, and so it was just kind of like that dark, alluring, like I said, figure in a mist that was always like, and then I've also really liked some of the movies as well, particularly The Shining, which he hates, but that's all right.
That's all right.
I don't need his approval anymore.
Nope. And also that version of The Shining is very different than the book.
Yeah. And so, they're so different that you can appreciate both,
Exactly.
And so I would call myself a Stephen King fan, but if I try to prove it, then no one's going to be happy.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. So I've read all the big ones, right? Like I've read Misery and I've read Carrie and I've read Pet Cemetery and The Shining and The Stand and all the big ones, but I haven't read the man writes lots and lots of books. And he writes books under like pseudonyms and like he's just a very prolific prolific author. So I would also say I'm a fan, but I'm not gonna like win any trivia contests at the pub.
Correct.
Yeah. I went into this having seen it handfuls of times when I got to rent horror movies as a kid. I think this was a pretty tame one as they go. But had you seen this movie before?
So no, I haven't. Let's see. The Stephen King ones that I've seen are Carrie, Christine, all the kind of like touchy-feely ones like Shawshank and Green Mile and Stand By Me. Obviously The Shining. I'm sure I'm missing one or two right now. But no. So I Pet Cemetery was not one of the ones I had seen before. This is the first time I've seen it. And I have a strange relationship with horror. Like I don't seek it out. Like if I go to like which don't exist, I go to the video store. Like horror might be like my fifth pick.
Yeah.
But I continually enjoy horror films that I see. Like I enjoyed, ones that I may not seek out. Like I am into like the supernatural horror.
Yeah.
Like I am into what is in the darkness. I am into suspenseful horror or horror that deals with death or entities out. Like I love like Lovecraftian style horror, and that kind of stuff of just like the unknown, like the dark side of the unknown.
Yeah.
So there, even though I may be squeamish, I continually have enjoyment and appreciation for horror films. I love The Thing. The
Thing's great. Yeah,
The Thing is great.
The Thing is scary, and The Thing is gross.
That thing is gross.
That thing is super gross. This is pretty gross too, but it saves it all for the end. The beginning. What did you think of the beginning with the credits, where it was like all scrolling over the graves in the pet cemetery and hearing the children read their clever great? It's like Disneyland's Haunted Mansion. The kids all wrote funny little epitaphs on the graves, and now we're hearing little child's voices be like, "Here lies Buster. He was a real snufter."
I thought it mostly worked. Like I thought it definitely tapped into that kind of raw. Like this is one of those movies that taps into some specific emotions and fears, and I think is strong because of it. Like the fear, like the connection, that the childhood connection, but also like the adult connection that we have with our furry babies. Furry babies. So at the beginning, you're kind of touched on that. You're it's like we're now older adults. You have children. Like I've got a niece. There's some connection of us and kids and our fear for them as well as but also just kind of like not only our perception of death, but then the children's perception of death.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that this movie does really well is like the fear of like these trucks that are just plowing through the street.
Yeah. This is the dumbest street to ever live on. We see Chekhov's truck right at the beginning almost run over the unattended baby.
And I'm sure, and you can, even if it's a little elevated, that just the idea of these big trucks, like if they were only driving 45 miles per hour, but through your neighborhood, that would be like a legitimate fear that would just constantly be like an ice pick in the brain to you.
Right.
And I think it's super effective, just like seeing these pet graves and kind of thinking about not only your connection with these animals as like family members, but also what maybe the kids and their experience of dealing with death for the first time. You know, I thought some of the kids were a little stupid
Yeah.
in the voiceovers, and that could have been a little better there.
But that's basically what the movie is about. It's like how do you deal with death?
Yes.
And like at what age is it appropriate to start dealing with it head on?
Yeah, and I think it's strange to put it this way, but pets are a good way to introduce death
Yeah.
into one's life. You know, death for beginners.
Yes. And that's why there is this big pet cemetery. So this family moves into their new house, which is right beside Thunder Death Road and the world's largest pet cemetery. Although it seems like their house and the old man across the street, Judd, are the only two houses on this entire stretch of Murder Road. They move in with their two, it's the mom and the dad, Star Trek mom and dad, and their two kids, as somewhat older, maybe 7-8-year-old daughter and a little tiny, maybe 3-year-old baby, come to live in this new place where he's going to be the town doctor. And the first thing we learn is that there's this huge pet cemetery right there because all of these pets get sacrificed to the Murder Road.
Yeah.
And it's like really, really old and really, really creepy. And the old man, to the mother's chagrin, is like, "Oh, this is the place where the dead speak."
Yeah, and that's how they talk. They talk like Katharine Hepburn.
They do.
It's set in Maine. Yeah.
Even though it's Herman Munster.
Yeah, Fred Gwynne, who's great in this movie.
He talks like he's from Cabot Cove in an episode of Murder, She Wrote.
Oh, that's the road where all the pets get killed, don't you know?
Don't you know? Keep your kids away.
You know what's funny is that this movie was literally filmed where the place that Stephen King imagined the book setting to be.
Oh,
like,
really?
It is literally the place.
Wow.
And he lived only 20 minutes away from this location, so he was on the set like every day.
That's awesome. This is like a creepy, there's the front yard is where they choose to hang out all the time, but like that's where the death road is. It's like, put up a fence. That should be your number one thing. Like, before you unpack any boxes full of kitchen stuff, put up a fence.
Oh, the HOA won't allow any fences over here.
No, gotta have immediate access to the Murder Road. There's like sort of a B story of a housekeeper they have.
Yes.
Who has like stomach pains. They'll go away. No need to see the doctor.
Where does that go, by the way?
Well, she kills herself, and then they go to her funeral. And it's just another episodic instance of death as the movie goes. But there's supernatural elements in this movie as well, because on his first day at the job, a boy dies. He gets hit by a truck.
A teenage boy, yeah.
On a different murder road. Apparently, these New England streets are just full of trucks flying to and fro. He can't save him, but he tries so wholeheartedly to save him that the ghost of the boy attaches itself to Lewis, the dad,
right,
and tries to keep him out of the pet cemetery.
Right. So, like, if Jiminy Cricket had like an exposed brain coming out of his head.
Yeah, that should be the tagline for this movie. What if Jiminy Cricket had an exposed brain?
The tagline for this movie is pretty darn good, which is sometimes dead is better.
I love that. And Fred Gwynne says that sometimes dead is better.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that should be the tagline. It is.
It is. Yeah, Stephen King is pretty good at crafting a tagline, and he wrote the screenplay for this.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot to like about this movie. The lead actors are not within that category.
Yeah.
I just, I like Denise Crosby. She's the mom. She's in, Star Trek: The Next Generation as Tasha Yar. And then the dad reminds me of Adam Pally. But they just are not giving me anything. I don't know if it's because half of their lines seem like they were recorded in post. Like half of it seems like it's ADR.
And it's also very written. The dialogue's very, very written by Stephen King. Don't shilly-shally, make the girl a promise, right? It's like you can read that stuff, but you can't, like, people don't, unless you are a person who's from there who really talks like that, it's really hard to make that seem natural, and it never did seem natural. Also, the parents had no chemistry with each other. Like, I kept being like, are they on the verge of divorce? Like, is their marriage bad? The family of the wife hates the dad. So much so that he doesn't go to Thanksgiving with them.
Yeah.
And that's when the little girl's cat dies.
Yeah. Oh, poor kitty. Poor Churchill.
Poor Churchill.
That was an attractive cat.
It was, and even dead, it was a really cute cat.
Yeah, it's. So I looked this up. It looks like a Russian blue, but it's what they call a British short hair. And my brother has one of those, and so I was imprinting additional emotions on it.
Aww. Well, Papa Munster is like, don't worry. If we climb over these brambles that were clearly made to keep humans out of here, we can bury him in this bigger pet cemetery where the dead walk.
Yeah, so why did he suggest that? If, like, there's a couple of things where people kind of have these odd about faces, Why did he want, if the whole point is like Fred Gwynne's character Judd, if Judd, who I really found fascinating, not only as a performance, but as a character.
He really inserts himself into their lives.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, it's like they come off as not from Maine, so out of towners, and he comes off as an old in-towner.
Yeah, died in the wool, like he's been there for generations.
Yes, and he is 100% welcoming. And I think that's what was part of the appeal to me, is that he was accepting, he was welcoming, but you did feel like they were from different social cultures, which was cool.
Yeah. And it was like Insta grandpa from the moment he first saved the baby from out of the road. He was like, let me tell you how things go around here in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
I'm your grandpa now. Let's have a picnic.
Yeah, I felt like he needed it. And I was into it. But yeah, so he is. If he's the one who has these traumatic experiences about this graveyard, why is he suggesting that they bury the cat up there? I'm sure it was explained exactly at the moment I was looking at my phone trivia.
I think that they sort of touch on it later, after Gage dies. He touches on it, and after he explains that he knows about not the pet cemetery, but like the ancient Indian burial ground, because he was shown it after his beloved pet Spot died. He buried Spot there, but Spot came back evil, and he had to kill Spot again and bury him in the regular cemetery, which is like, okay, you just made a case for not burying pets in the ancient Indian burial ground. So why bury the little girl's cat there?
Why insist on it so strongly? I feel like we're missing the explanation on here, and this is the portion where we're going to get an internet comment. But
because it probably explained it in the book, but he does say he also tells about a boy who came home from the war and got wasn't and got killed when he got home, got buried in the pet cemetery, and turned complete feral zombie.
Yeah, which was the goofiest. Like, this movie does a lot right. It does a lot wrong. That zombie that they had was the goopiest looking zombie.
Yeah.
And it totally pulled me out of like the horror of the story.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I didn't think it needed it either, but he explains that the ground, so he sort of explains that the ground of the burial, the Indian burial ground, was hungry, that it had turned sour and it was hungry. So it was like trying to feed on the family after they moved in, and he had like fallen victim to it.
Yeah, and I like how Stephen King uses these kind of old colloquial ways of describing evil. You know, the ground has become sour. You know,
but
like
it hungers. The soil of a man's heart is stonier, Lewis.
Yeah, because it's ultimately these local people who are coming up with their own theories. It's not like they were told what happens, and so they're going to use their own words to create the explanations for this stuff.
But it seems to, and I'm sure the book is clearer, but it seems to want it both ways. So that when they're out walking on the path, it's like there are trees falling and winds screaming and trying to keep them away. But then also it's trying to entice them to go. So it's like nature's trying to keep them away, and the cemetery itself is trying to get them to go. I do love, though, that once he gets there, he's like, I'm going to sit around and smoke cigarettes while you bury the cat.
I'm old and tired, so good luck.
Good luck. I'm going to smoke a half a pack of Marlboros while you bury a cat, which seems to take all fucking day. Bury one little cat. But so then the cat comes back, and it's an undead cat.
And you know what? There's a point, and it definitely is a evil cat, but at one point it delivers him a rat, you know, which is supposed to be a gift.
It's a gift.
So the cat is trying to make amends. Like, it's not all evil. Look at, he's like, it's like a peace offering. Look what I have done for you.
Yeah, you brought me back from the dead. Thank you. I can no longer eat food that's not alive. Here's the spoils of my kill. Yeah,
see, look, the cat was trying to meet him halfway.
Yeah.
Either that or he was totally trolling the dude.
Yep.
So we don't know if the cat gained extra intelligence or it's in fact controlled by this darker evil spirit on the other side. That's the thing. I think, you know, I've only watched the trailer for the remake, but I think I get more of a sense that it's really like a dark spirit that is controlling this stuff.
Yes, it is like the spirit of the angry native peoples who are like, oh, you're gonna come take over our land and then come use our burial ground. Ooh, well, have we got a walloper for you? You do get a sense later when the baby becomes an evil zombie that the cat and the baby are in cahoots.
Yeah, absolutely. And the baby is much more, I guess, intelligent and strategic than I think any young baby would be. And so I definitely think that there is a puppeteering force with that. So I think the cat maybe was trolling him.
I think so. So the stinky cat was much beloved by the little girl and is now too stinky for her. They have a big family picnic with a kite out in the murder yard, and lo and behold, the baby gets run over.
Yeah, I have it written here. Dumb fucking dad, don't leave your kid right next to the dumb fucking road, you dumb fuck.
Yep.
Like it's like they're doing the kites and the dad just laughs and walks away as the kid just kind of runs off right towards the street.
Directly into the street, which we know to be the most dangerous street that anyone's ever lived near.
Yeah, so I feel like it's not... My problem is not the event. It's good for the story, and it should happen, but is how it is dramatized.
Agreed.
The way that it is dramatized, it is done... Either that's the way it came together, or just that's how it was envisioned and directed. It just comes off as wholesale negligent.
Yes, it does. And even the dad trips. Later, Judd tries to say the place wanted Gage,
Right.
that Gage the baby, so that he'd be tempted to come and bury him.
Yeah.
But he immediately goes from like, let's bury the cat, and you'll have an awesomely undead cat, to like, don't you go think about burying your dead baby up there.
Yeah. So this reminds me of a moment of like, it's a tough needle to thread, or of having something like this, which does literally happen, but not making the parents seem overtly negligent. And I feel like one of the best examples of this is Minority Report, where Tom Cruise, like they're at a public pool and the kid gets snatched. Well, how do you do that without making Tom Cruise look like he's negligent? And Spielberg does such a fine job of just distracting him briefly with having another kid swimmer go by them. They get a cute moment, and he looks right back 5 seconds later, and then there's no kid. Right.
We needed to feel, because the dad turns instantly bonkers.
Yeah.
He loses his mind. But I think that the ground, the soil, the entity, whatever you want to call it, the pet cemetery, was already calling to him and making him lose his mind. Like, as soon as he buried that cat, it was like, oh, I gotcha. I gotcha now.
Yeah. Isn't that when the teenage dude starts appearing?
He appears a little bit at the beginning, and he says to him the Judd line, the soil of a man's heart is stonier. You may want to go to the place where the dead speak, but don't go to the place where the dead walk. He says that right at the beginning. Before the cat.
It's a pretty good line.
It is. But then he starts appearing all the time, as you said, like a little brainless Jiminy Cricket, being like, don't go, don't do it. And he appears to the mom, don't go, don't do it. Nobody listens to him. He appears to the little girl, don't let your dad go, don't let him do it. There's also a B story, which I think is the scariest bit of this whole movie, and something that really stayed with me as a kid, of the mom's sister who had spinal meningitis and was like a twisted, gaunt monster that lived in their family's back bedroom. And her like lingering guilt over the death of her ill and scary sister comes into play. And I'm sure it's a very meaningful bit of the story, but it's also the scariest imagery in this movie, I think, even scarier than a scalpel wielding dead baby in a top hat.
Yeah, a fucking Chucky.
The cutest little Chucky in a top hat, and a little sailor's outfit. The like twisted meningitis sister just in the bed moaning and groaning and being like, you let me die, I'm coming for you now. Ugh, that stayed with me. What was your take on it with your fresh adult eyes?
Yeah, definitely creepy. I'd keep it in the movie. But it's one of those things that's meant to layer not only our understanding of death and regret, but just the regret thing. But it's almost ammunition for a character that is ultimately wood.
Yeah.
Wooden. And we just don't get to see them fret enough in private over these things. They react, and but we don't see them really roast under the fires of these things.
Yeah. And there's also, in addition to just not meeting the characters in any kind of emotional space. There's a lot of silly 80s details to me that are in this movie that just don't come across. Like the woman's son has just died. Like she's just come from her baby son's funeral, where her brawling father and husband knocked the baby out of his coffin.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So I love the moment where the coffin just pops open for a moment, and it's not like the way to overdo it is that you see the whole body, but instead it's just the little hand that we see, which is just one of those great moments. And when you see it, you think that parent is going to see that one image of just a little hand for the rest of their life.
Yep. But then that night she's asleep in a sexy black negligee.
Look, she had to do it for herself. It was
she had to feel beautiful somehow.
She was feeling down, let's be honest. It was a bummer, but she did it for herself.
Well, all I know is that most women sleep in an oversized t-shirt and baggy ass pants on the best day.
Yes.
And save their sexy PJs for special occasions. But I guess this was a very special night for her.
She's thinking, well, you know what? I bought it. I should use it.
And then when the dad, of course, goes to dig up Gage, he's like giddy and crazy. Like at one point, a police car comes and sweeps its lights over where he is grave robbing. They should see him. They don't see him, and he's like, come on, Gage. We're getting out of here.
That's got to be a lot of digging. That is so much digging to dig up is that literally 6 feet?
Yeah. And then he's got to go dig again and then cover him with rocks. I mean, that is a hard work day.
People really underestimate how much work it takes to dig up a dead body or to dig a grave that goes 6 feet down.
Yep. The show Supernatural really makes it look easy.
Yeah.
So he digs up the baby. He goes and buries the baby in the evil cemetery. And he then takes a really long nap, which apparently he deserves after all of the digging.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
The mom is in Chicago, where she like sort of went on a little retreat with the little girl, and she's getting all these images of like her dead sister and the Pascal Jiminy Cricket, and she's like, something's wrong. The little girl is like, Daddy's gonna do something real bad. Yeah,
there's a lot of different threads going on here, and for the most part they work. It's like, it's like, okay, so he's having visions, and then once the daughter has visions, it's like, okay, so it's like you're always trying to explain in reference some of these things to other movies. It's like, is it just the family line that has visions? But then when you start to realize, okay, it's really their proximity to this supernatural location,
right?
And the difference, and then there's with the teenage dude who's appearing, you start to realize that there's different stakeholders for this. There's the people who have died, who are on the good side of this, who want to try to influence the living, and so I thought it was really interesting when the little girl was able to start to have these visions and not making sense of it and just thinking that they're bad dreams. And I like that. What is the teenage dude's name? I've got it written down here. Pascal. So when he starts appearing to the wife, I like that. But it's also, it doesn't always work with him kind of standing over her shoulder, helping her get a rental car.
No.
Like, I feel I appreciate what he's doing, but it does take some of the steam out of it.
It does. Well, what about the Buick with the big scratch up the side? What about the Buick with the big scratch up the side?
Yeah, it's a moment for levity, but I wish that it wasn't levity at that point.
I agree. And, it makes sense later when he's like, it's trying to stop you. It's trying to keep you away. But wouldn't it want her there?
Mm-hmm.
It's too late to stop him from burying the baby. So you'd think that the evil entity wouldn't want to stop her from getting there. It would want to bring her in.
Yes. Yeah. More.
That's where I got confused. And then, of course, the scary baby, he leaves the scary baby to claw his own way and find his own way up the path, which I think is a little irresponsible as well. But we've already established that he's not the best dad.
Right.
So scary baby comes and immediately murders Herman Munster.
Yeah. Oh my God. So there are some great painful attacks.
Oh,
Again, that's a tough balancing act of how do you make a tiny little child who could be easily physically overpowered? How do you make them dangerous and insidious and effective against someone who is much bigger than them?
right.
And I think they really do a good job of not only realistic attacks, targets of opportunity, but also just so cringy and disturbing that it's very effective.
Yeah, when they slash the ankle. And
like the Achilles tendon,
Ooh.
and then Herman Munster gets slashed in the face, basically like the Joker.
Yeah, he gets jokered,
slashing his mouth open.
But Oof. It's like you said. So the dead baby comes back from the dead, drags itself out of its rock-covered grave, walks all the way back to the parents' house, finds its dad's medical case, gets out the scalpel, goes to Judd's house, waits and plays hide and seek with him, murders Judd, then just a crime of opportunity, murders the mom,
and
then calls the dad on the phone.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work for a baby.
What else? He's got nothing but free time at this point.
It's true. He doesn't need a nap anymore.
No.
But so dad has gone fully crazy. He puts the cat to sleep. He uses some kind of drug, some kind of doctor drug he has. He puts the cat to sleep.
He uses doctor drugs.
He puts baby Gage back to sleep.
Yeah.
And then
that was rough seeing him scruff that cat. That was rough.
Yeah.
Can we just side note how difficult it is to direct cats? Like a dog is much easier to direct because you can train them. You can train them to do specific things. Most animals don't want to please humans.
Right.
And which is why they're not very trainable,
Yeah. I have a hedgehog that doesn't want to do anything.
Yeah, it's not intelligence. It's just whether these animals, like dogs, want to please people. Like a chimpanzee does not care if you're happy. They don't. So it's like, so it's harder to train them to do some specific things, especially with cats. It's like getting, just seeing the shot of the cat sleeping on the kid's bed. And then mom comes in and says goodnight, and then says goodnight to the cat. Like, that's a tough shot because the cat has to want to be comfortable, has to want to hang out with the kid, has to want to lay down on the bed next to her. And you have to kind of give them time. They won't just do that. So just kind of watching moments like that, just kind of thinking of how hard it is to get them to do stuff.
Well, and it must have been hard for him as an actor to grab the cat, catch the cat and hold it up like that and let it get shot in the butt.
Yeah. These are, I think, a lot of just one takes.
Yeah. Also the baby ties a noose around the mom's neck and lines it up so that she'll drop dramatically out of the attic slot. So the baby is really
at that point
maximizing his time.
Yeah. Living his best death.
Yes. But he does get a little shot in the neck and he's like, okay, well, a failed experiment with Gage, but my wife, I've learned nothing. She's gonna be fine because she just died.
Right. I have to say I love that line where the baby has been syringed and he walks away, and I feel like it was an improv, but maybe it wasn't. But the kid just walks away. No fair. No fair.
No fair, Daddy. No fair. And he burns Judd's house down. Like this man is going to jail. I mean, he obviously gets murdered, but what happens? So that's the end of the movie. He buries the wife in the cemetery of rebirth. She comes back looking disgusting.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I keep taking the conversation backwards. What would you do if you were him? You know, your wife is dead, your kid is dead, you know, the next door neighbor is dead. Like, that just seems like the breaking point. Like, it's like all I can think of is if I was him, that it's like, great, now everyone is going to think that I was the mass murderer.
Right.
That her, like, his wife's dad is going to know that I was the murderer who is going to flip out. Like, I would lose it at that point. I would have burned myself in the house.
Yeah.
You know,
you wouldn't have just sat on the floor and played solitaire till your undead wife came back to stab you in the gut.
Right. Exactly. Like, in a posthumous way, like that. In some ways, hopefully you would then have been considered a victim.
Right. But the mom will continue to be undead.
Right. And then hurt other people, probably. She probably is going to stalk the neighbors that we never got to see, you know? Even, like, either she goes now house to house killing them, or she bides her time in the forest, you know? And becomes a permanent fixture there.
She becomes like Cropsy.
She becomes Cropsy. She becomes the creature in the forest who kills and you know, it's like you kind of need the dark spirit. Kind of just doesn't only want a body count. You know, he needs to have the more. He needs to get these numbers in, and if you have if you play the long game of having the creature who picks people off in the forest, then you have a higher chance of continuing this dark reign.
Yeah. And everyone knows the legend of the suburban Star Trek mom who roams these woods.
Who died right there next to the giant lobster sign.
So I like you thought this movie had some laughable dated bits, but was mostly pretty effective. So on a scale of 1 beautiful but undead cat to 10 beautiful but undead cats, how many beautiful but undead cats do you give this movie?
So I think I'm going to give it a 7.
Oh, very nice.
There's a lot of things I think that work. The stiffness, I just had so much difficulty investing in the two parents.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that there's a lot of things that I understand it was a low budget and there was probably not as much time to dramatize everything, but I felt like the director, who we haven't even touched on, Mary Lambert, she did a lot of music videos. I just felt like there were a lot of things that I wish were dramatized differently or juiced a little more, that there were some things left on the table or were just kind of oddly dramatized. And I think it's more of less of a choice thing and more of just, you know, like making movies is difficult, you know.
It's really hard.
And when you're up against when you have less days than you wish you had, when you have less budget than you wish you had, and just less experience in terms of doing suspense and horror, you know.
Right.
That I felt like there was some stuff that I wish just were dramatized a little differently. I ultimately I had a good time. So yeah, I'll give it a 7.
I love that. I also had a good time. I like this movie as a kid. I like it as a grown up. I think that the 2019 adaptation did a better job of all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of have that one in my mind too. So I give this one a 6.5 because I think it did a good job, but it is hard to see it as not a silly 80s horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I would recommend people watch a Pet Cemetery, maybe not this Pet Cemetery, but I would say, the 2019 one I think is pretty good and solves a lot of the problems we had with this one.
Mm-hmm.
And just like because we can be darker and grittier, and that's what's expected now.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, and then just looking from like the imagery of the remake, like they picked a really creepy looking cat.
They sure did.
And the problem with this one is that the cat is just too darn cute.
It's so cute. It's got a little smush face.
Mm-hmm.
What is your deep cut recommendation?
So, dear listeners, sometimes coming up with these recommendations is a losing battle. It just seems too shallow to recommend another Stephen King movie. What I'm going to recommend is what I feel is one of the. It's hard, so it's hard to find a real good book on writing.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the few books I recommend is Stephen King on writing.
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing is that he really focuses on the craft. The mistakes that a lot of these writing books make is that they reverse engineer stories that really worked and then turn that into kind of a paradigm,
Right.
But his book really focuses on doing the craft of it, techniques, best practices, the things he does as a craftsman,
I love that.
and the most important thing is showing up and letting the muse know what your operating hours are and showing up. Yeah. And so I recommend, if you're interested in writing, if you're interested particularly in like screenwriting, the two books I recommend the most are Stephen King's On Writing, Robert McKee's Story, and yeah, those would be my top two.
That's a great recommendation. I love that. And like the thing Stephen King is known for is just like showing up and putting in the work,
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, it becoming a habit.
Yeah.
You are a long distance runner. You have to run every day.
I love that. So I kind of went undead to undead connection. And so what I wanted to recommend is something that does the undead in a new way, I feel. In the world that we live in now, we've had, 20 million years of the Walking Dead,
Mm-hmm.
who did the undead great.
Mm-hmm.
But I am really into how the undead are being portrayed in The Last of Us.
Yeah.
As being like taken over by the earth, like taken over by a fungus that can like sense your movement and such.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my recommendation. It's currently streaming HBO Max.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you been watching it at all?
Yeah.
Are you loving
That's great.
it?
Yes. Yeah. I'm a big zombie fan. That's another the kind of like
The paradox of Nathan.
The paradox of Nathan is that I'm actually a huge zombie fan. Like I love George Romero, who I heard was rumored to direct this film before they changed the schedule and he couldn't do it.
Oh.
And I love Dawn of the Dead. But yeah, I've been watching The Last of Us, and I think it's been great.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Nathan. Where can people find and support your artistic endeavors?
So, what is this episode coming out?
This is coming out in like 2 weeks.
Okay, so if this comes out in time,
this is coming out really soon, actually.
Okay, good. That's good news. So, my feature film, The Last Movie Ever Made, we are beginning our film festival run, and if you're not in the Phoenix area, then that's okay. Hopefully, we're going to get in film festivals throughout the year, throughout the country. But our first screening is at the Phoenix Film Festival on March 24th. So on the 24th, the 27th, and on April 1st, we've got 3 screenings. It'll be playing there at the Phoenix Film Festival, albeit all 3 screenings doing a Q&A afterwards. And so if you do hear this, if you are in town, please say hi. That's awesome. But we do hopefully plan to play at other festivals throughout the year in other parts of the country. If you go to squishystudios.com, or if we end up having a lastmovieevermade.com, we'll be posting all that stuff there. We'll be posting it on social medias for both Squishy Studios and The Last Movie Ever Made for future screenings.
Excellent. It's totally worth seeing. I highly recommend it. You can find me at the Neighborhood Comedy Theater, The Place in downtown Mesa, Arizona. You can also find me at Most Excellent Krissy online, and you can find the pod at mostexcellentpod.com on Instagram and Facebook. We do have a Facebook group, so join us there. Also, like, rate, review, star, thumbs up. And if you're already this deep into the movie with us, you might as well become a member. If you've stayed this late into the pod, become a member, and you get some extra bonus content, some extra fun stuff. And we really appreciate you. So, when you're out there in the world, being a responsible pet owner and responsible parent, keeping everyone away from the road, be sure to keep the Most Excellent Podcast motto in mind. Be excellent to each other and
party on, dudes.